My name is Tony Shabangu, and I'm here to explain Ubuntu in a short video. The word Ubuntu comes from Africa as a continent as a whole, but specifically Ubuntu comes from Southern Africa, from the Nguni word Ubu, which means being, and Tu, which means human. Essentially, the word spells out being human, but it's not exclusive to Southern Africa. As I said, the word is found throughout the African continent and may be understood as different versions like Vumuntu, Bumuntu, Butu, Momotu, Gimuntu, and different other versions, which express this idea of what it is to be human. Now, in South Africa, when we use this word Ubuntu, being human, it is usually coupled with a maxim. This maxim or phrase is known as umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, which essentially means I am because we are, or a person is a person through and with others. This essentially kind of locates the human in a community. Instead of just saying a human is a thinking thing, we say a human or being human is a communal act. It's a communal relationship that one has with others. So, this idea of being human or being communally placed is understood using other phrases outside the maxim umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, and you may have heard these, like for instance, it takes a village to raise a child, which expresses the idea that you require many people to help you make a person or raise a person. And the idea of no man or no woman is an island is also expressive of this idea that we are relational beings. We are essentially human because we relate in a human way. Now, as I said, the word Ubuntu locates the human being in a community. And what were these communities like? These communities with Ubuntu? Well, in African societies, as I said, traditional African societies, these communities were tight-knit communities that had family bonds throughout the community. And these family bonds were not restricted by biology or status, but rather by mere fact that we are in a community. So you would find a child calling their neighbor Uma, which is mother, and the neighbor, responding as my child. This is the intimacy of the kind of relationships that would exist in a community with Ubuntu. And it wouldn't be reserved just for titles, but the way I treat my neighbor, who is an older woman, would be the way I would treat my mother, exactly the same way. So I know when I was being raised and the way I grew up, this idea was still in place, and my neighbor could, if I do wrong, give me a hiding in my mother's place. This is not so much a practice nowadays because things have changed, but this is the idea that a parent, any parent in the community, represents my mother, my father, my uncle, someone like that, and they are exactly the same, essentially. So now, these communities that saw each other in this light exhibit a certain kind of care in their relationships with others, regardless, as I said, of status and biology. And people would take care of their neighbors' kids, as I said, exactly as their own, without any distinction between their own kids and the neighbors' kids, just to encourage this culture of we are all one extended family. Now, this idea extended to strangers who were not a part of the community too, where strangers would be brought in or allowed in to visit, and when they'd be like in their state of visiting, they would be given the best of everything. So, best portion of meat, best linen and bedding when it's time for bedtime. The kids must entertain the visitor, make sure the visitor feels at home. Why this happened? It's because people who were strangers or people who were travelers were people who were displaced from their communities. So they were people who were outside of the care of their community, outside of their family unit, the community, and they were essentially people in need. Thus, you would give them as much as possible in order to help them still feel like a person outside of their community. Interesting. Interesting times. Now, communities with Ubuntu, again, they value themselves in a certain way where everyone is intricately tied to one another. And this means that even when I have personal achievements, I understand my personal achievements within the context of the community. You may be like, no ways. I worked for this degree on my own. The degree has my name and I earned it, so it's mine and mine alone. Not true. When you think of it, even something like a degree is the efforts of the community. You are with your family, you are with people, you are with you are with your study community, your university community. You're constantly interacting with people as you are working towards this degree. Whether or not the interactions become fruitful for your writing or your final essay or exam, that is a different story. But in terms of your personhood, who you are as an academic, this depends on your community too. So one does not achieve human excellence in a vacuum. Even this degree that I got on my own, I needed my family, I needed my friends, I needed my sponsor, I needed, all like a variation of people in my community to help me achieve that. Now, this may still be a bit vague in terms of what does this mean ethically? Now, when we talk about Ubuntu, we talk about it in two senses. So far, I've been talking about it in a descriptive sense, describing what it means to be a person, describing what it means to be in a community, and basically, essentially, when we talk about the descriptive aspect of Ubuntu, we are talking about the description, being a person, humanness, being a person located in the community. But there's another aspect to Ubuntu called the prescriptive sense. And what Ubuntu does in this sense, Ubuntu prescribes how a person, at least one who's dignified, ought to conduct herself in light of the community. So now that we know that a person is located in a community, there's a way of acting, there's a way of conducting yourself when you are located in a community. And since a person is an integral part of the community, their actions are judged as good if they improve communal relationships, and they are judged as bad when they bring about the opposite. So when they bring about discord and they bring about a certain self-centeredness, egotism, then those actions in the Ubuntu community are bad. But if the actions bring about a sense of harmony between me and my neighbor, then those actions are deemed to be good. Good? Good. Now, this idea of prescriptive Ubuntu is understood in slightly different versions or ways, and I'm just going to give you two just to give you an understanding of how Ubuntu ethicists come to these ideas. Now, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who is quite prominent in South African politics and South African history and South African religion, has this to say about Ubuntu. Essentially, Ubuntu speaks to the very essence of being human, and this means that one can either be more or less human depending on how much Ubuntu one possesses. This essentially says that the way you treat others speaks about who you are. If you treat people in ways that bring about discord, that bring about arguments and separate people, you are said to have less Ubuntu. Whereas if you treat people in ways that bring people together, that ways that consider the community, that consider that everyone is part and parcel of your life, then you are said to have more Ubuntu. Tutu goes on to say, once humanity is inextricably tied to others, we belong in a bundle of life. Now, essentially, Tutu's trying to push for the idea, saying that the way we treat others essentially has implications on who we are. And Tutu expresses this idea, saying that he or she who has Ubuntu, we give them high praise and say, yo, unobuntu. And the person who is unable to exhibit Ubuntu, who feels threatened by others and other and community, that person, they are said to not have Ubuntu. And essentially, what that means is that they are moving out of the realm of being human. Because remember, we said Ubuntu expresses what it means to be human. And when you don't have Ubuntu, it means you do not have the fundamental components that make you human. Right? And in this light, action or lack of action has moral implications for the person who has Ubuntu. Good? So if you act or you don't act, this determines what kind of person you are. Furthermore, Noya says Ubuntu stresses the importance of community, solidarity, caring, and sharing. This worldview advocates a profound sense of interdependence and emphasizes that our true human potential can only be realized in partnership with others. So, the goal of morality, according to this ethical vision of fullness of humanity, is that even when we have personal growth, participation in community with others is essential to that personal growth. Again, emphasizing the idea that no human is an island, that our own personal growth depends on the community. Now, the ethical version of Ubuntu, which I find most focused and speaks directly to the core of Ubuntu and a sense of being in community, is found for me in Metz and Chaya's work. Metz and Chaya take a different approach and focus on two recurrent themes that are recurrent in traditional African societies that exhibited Ubuntu. And they say that the principles of Ubuntu says that actions are right insofar as they are a matter of living harmoniously with others or honoring communal relationships. This means that when you do something, the action is deemed right if it honors the communal relationship you're in, if it honors others that are in the community with you, then that action is right. If it doesn't, if it fails to do so, then that action is deemed as wrong. Now, the community itself, when the community expresses Ubuntu or has Ubuntu, Metz and Chaya say they need to exhibit two, or they usually exhibit two themes. And these themes are solidarity and shared identity. Solidarity, first, is the idea that one has a moral obligation to be concerned for the good of others in terms of both one's sympathetic emotional reaction towards other people and one's helpful behavior towards them. So you're not just in a position where you can care or you can't care for other people. You are obliged to be concerned. If you fail to do so, you are basically failing to show people Ubuntu. You are obliged to be sympathetic towards others and their emotional reactions and behaviors. This means that you are not simply a robot that processes information, but you are a person that understands and is concerned with others. Shared identity, on the other hand, is the idea that one has a moral obligation to think of oneself as bound up with others, to define oneself as a member of a common group, and to participate in its practices. This means you have a duty to identify with others. You have a duty to see others you're in community with as we. You have a duty to express yourself around others as you would with family. Now, a community with Ubuntu, which can be understood as a harmonious community, usually has to have a combination of both shared identity and solidarity. Without it, it is quite difficult to achieve the state of harmony, which is best for Ubuntu practice. So yeah, that's the gist of it. And the next video I will send, I will be unpacking how Ubuntu can be applied. Cool. Thanks.